Kent State. Kenny Burns. What are we doing? All right. Obviously, it's not Kent State's fault. At the time, I think you and I both agreed, like, hey, that could be a pretty decent hire. Like he was a fantastic positional coach. You know, you and I, being people that are not necessarily beat writers for particular schools, from an outsider's perspective, it's like, okay, well, like Kenny Burns seems like he's built a good relationship with the players that he's had. He's recruited well at the position that he coached. He did a good job developing those players. Maybe some of that can translate throughout an entire program if you put him in charge of one. Well, turns out Kenny Burns may not be the guy that you want in charge of your program for multiple different reasons. Well, one reason in particular is the reason that he got fired for, which was stuff that you can look up on Google and maybe read message boards and whatever to find out maybe what it actually is or what it's speculated to be. But whatever it is, it does not sound good. So Kent State, they first put him on administrative leave, so we didn't talk about him and coaching carousel stuff, but then they finally canned him, and then they promoted a guy by the name of Mark Carney to be the interim head coach, who was the offensive coordinator for Kent State last year. He was previously an offensive coordinator at Charlotte, and then before that, he was an offensive coordinator at Virginia State. And he actually, believe it or not, I think he's had somewhat success, play calling on the offensive side of the ball to some degree, given the talent that he's had. At Virginia State, when he was there, I mean, they had their best season in their program's history. Their offense scored 440 points in just 11 games. If you do that math, that's a lot of freaking points. And for 11 games, you're averaging over 40 points a game. Or about exactly 40 points a game. So I'm looking at this, and I'm like, all right, so he can maybe play call an offense a little bit. But what do you need to do, CD? I'm going to ask you this, right? Like, Kent State is a unique program. They don't have a lot of resources. Their geography, it's actually not terrible, given that, you're in the state of Ohio. I think there's a lot of underrated talent in the state of Ohio that people don't talk about enough.
Especially at the high-end talent level.
Yeah. Right. High-end talent, right, you're going to find going to Ohio State, whatever. They're going to move on, whatever. But there are plenty of 3 stars, or high-end 2 stars that you can find in there and in Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Kentucky, in that area.
Michigan.
You can find. Michigan. You just, in my opinion, you have no resources, right? You need to have a really good offense, right, in terms of like just unique, okay? And then you need to find and develop players as fast as possible and as many of them as possible, because you know that they're going to be transferring out of your school to Power 5 levels if they're good. So,
yeah.
What do you feel like the coach at Kent State needs to do to win?
Just that. Also, but it's more than that too. I mean, we saw Sean Lewis have some success there. He ran that unique offense too. Kenny Burns, I just think it was more of, really good position coach, maybe not a good head coach. And like a lot goes on being a head coach, especially in the past couple of years. A lot has changed. It's gotten harder for these G5 schools to keep up and keep their players and whatever it may be, right? And keep their coaches, whatever, right? So like it's been a lot. And so it takes a special kind of person to be able to succeed at those spots, especially if you don't have a ton of experience at the coordinator level or even the head coach level, right? So, but we did see Kenny Burns actually recruit pretty darn well. I mean, he was top half in both of his years in the MAC, right? That's all you can ask for. And you talked about the talent in the state of Ohio. The problem is too, who's also in the state of Ohio, not only Ohio State and Cincinnati, but you also have other MAC schools, Miami, Ohio, Ohio University, Bowling Green, Toledo, right? Like you have Akron, you have a lot. There's like 5 or 6 schools, right? So it's not just lock down your borders, get everyone that Ohio State and Cincinnati doesn't get. And it's harder than that too. Yeah, to me, he talked about it too. He wants to make football fun again. And I think, we could see a similar situation to what Stanford's kind of going through and their thing. Now, this is a lot different because, number one, this is Kent State and Stanford. So that's just different expectations and different whatever it may be, different things going on there with the revenue sharing in the ACC versus the MAC with Kent State here. But it was awful. I mean, Kent State football was terrible. So you have Sean Lewis, you hit on Sean Lewis, and you have to go out and replace him, and you go pick up Kenny Burns, and you went 1-23 with one win against an FCS school. That was it. You went 0-12 in the MAC, or excuse me, you went 0-16 in the MAC, and you went 0-23 against 0-22 actually against FBS opponents. You also lost to an FCS opponent this past season. So it's not great at all. But listen, if there's someone that's going to do it, you've got Carney, who's not the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney. He's Northeastern Ohio guy, right? So he's got talent. He's got roots there. He's super upbeat, super energetic. You kind of saw some energy kind of get back into, what reports are saying, back into the practices. It feels like, while there's not going to be a ton of talent there, you have a chance to just like gel as a team and like, let's do it together. Let's do it for each other and just kind of play better than you're supposed to. Now you've seen some guys in the portal go, and that's going to happen at Kent State every year, but it's also because of the firing of the coach and whatever it may be. I don't think it's anyone that's just crazy irreplaceable because of the reality that was the talent on that team. It will be interesting to see what they can do in the spring portal and what kind of holes that Carney and staff feels that they need to fill. I don't know. I mean, it can't get much worse, right? And so change sometimes helps a lot. Change sometimes doesn't do anything. So we'll see what happens. It's an interim head coach. So obviously he will have an extended interview and he will have a chance to win the job and quote unquote win the head coaching job this season if he outperforms expectations, if you start to see recruiting pick up, if you see yada, yada, yada go on. And what he talks about, habits, right? And getting 1% better each day. If they do that, right? And they can actually start seeing actual progress on the field, I think he's got an absolute chance of, getting it done. I think he's excited for the opportunity. I think, sounds like he's been really nice in the community as well. So hopefully, our Kent State folks over there in Eastern Ohio are excited for him and kind of rally behind him. Maybe it breathes life in your program. Maybe it doesn't. But, we'll just see. I think it was the obvious choice. I would not have gone outside higher, right? Because kind of too late to do that, to give him a real chance at establishing, whatever it may be. Yeah, let's try it out for a year and see what happens.
Yeah, and my guess would be that he doesn't have the head coaching spot at Kent State next year. This time, we could be wrong though. I mean, he's able to use his Fordham connection to land what I think is actually a pretty good transfer portal quarterback in CJ Montez. We'll see what kind of life that he can breathe into that offense, because we did see some, dare I say, with all of the pun intended, some flashes of like decent play making ability at the quarterback position and like some semblance of an offense despite having the worst talent in the country on that side of the football. I mean,
Yeah. Well, and they were
if we see some immediate
explosive.
changes, yeah, they were explosive, and that being explosive, is it's either, well, it can be both, right, or one or the other, right? It's explosive athletes or play calling, right, and play design, and we know which one it was not. All
Yeah.
right, that's for certain. So, what kind of stuff can he get done this year? What is the expectation, right? Because we're gonna have to talk about that when we give ultimately like a grade for this hire. Like, it's not really fair to give a grade because they didn't have a choice. They were gonna have to like promote someone from within. They didn't have an opportunity to go outside and hire someone necessarily. So, I don't know. What are the expectations? There are no expectations, right? So, like, when we give the grades, it's like kind of a dog and pony show there because what do you even do? How do you can't evaluate that?
Here's what I'll say too. And one concern I have, and I'm not saying that this is the end all be all, it could work in the reverse effect. But if you want to play devil's advocate here, one of the very few good things about, your team last year was, like I said, explosiveness, especially in the passing game with Ulatowski, right? And McCray, right? And Luke Florio too, right? You have an offensive coordinator who was like, that was his job, right? Carney, that was his job to create explosive plays. He could just sit in his lab all week and just create plays and find weaknesses in defenses and do that kind of stuff. Now he gets promoted to head coach, and some of that responsibility he has added to that. And he maybe doesn't have all the time in the world to sit there and just craft and whatever it may be. Is that something you're worried about? Where, like, yes, it makes sense that you promote the offensive coordinator because you're not going to promote anyone else, but maybe one of the good things about your team last year might take a step back because he won't have time. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know. I mean, it's like with that, you just have to wait and see because we've never seen him call plays as a head coach.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Some coaches can do it. Some coaches can't do it. We're gonna find out if this guy in his mid 40s who's called a lot of offense in his time. We're gonna see if he's able to do it. I have no clue. And like, so you can't evaluate the staff that he hired, right? Because it's
Kenny
the
Burns.
same staff. It's like, how do you? We have to talk about it, right? But there's no real evaluation. Here's my grade. All right, it's a B.
Yeah.
Okay, he'll meet expectations, which are
Probably get
whatever.
fired.
There's no expectation. There's no expectations. You get fired. Whatever.
Yeah. That's mine too. And here's what I will say, and this is the best way I could sum it up, right? Because we have, like, if you're kidding yourself, right? If you're like coming out here and making all these bold proclamations, oh yada yada yada. Like, this, whatever just went down, right? It sucks. Hopefully everyone involved is okay and whatever happens. But if you talk about, like, strictly about the Kent State football program, right now as it stands, I am a little bit more excited about it than I was a month and a half ago. Is that crazy to say? Just because it's like change, you know? And you're not just
I
changing
mean,
for change. It's not guaranteed to produce any different results, whatever it may be. And I was rooting for Kenny Burns, obviously Minnesota guy, but it was in a bad spot, and it was not getting better this coming season. And maybe this does get better. If not, also, lastly, too, not unfortunately, one of the best things for this situation is I don't think Kent State's going to have to be worried about paying a buyout. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal at
that's a
that
big deal at
program.
that program.
So if you whiff on a coach, you're probably going to have to bite the bullet, either keep him on longer than you should because you can't afford his buyout, or you find a way to get him out of there without paying his buyout. And now you can actually have a legit, you know, a year plus to vet candidates, to get a search committee if you're going to have one, and to figure out who you want leading your program going forward. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because you're gonna have. I mean, there's a ton of transfers that left this program, right? But like we talk about how bad they were last year, so like you can't really say like, oh my gosh, they lost all these players to the transfer portal, and then be like, well, that matters, unless you're saying that talent that left is actually pretty good. I mean, some of it was, right, but they also replenished some with players that have some question marks around them. Players that went from lower levels, but also players with a lot of experience. You know, I mean, you're looking at their offensive line, and what they got pretty much everyone there has 4 or 5 years of experience at some point. Like, so it'll be interesting to see. Like, I think that there's a pretty good chance that they actually win more games than they did. Well,
There is
I would hope that they win more games than they did last year, and that wouldn't be saying much. But fascinated to see how this works out, and I just think it's really tough to be Kent State right now and be in this MAC where you have pretty much every other team being competitive other than basically Akron, who, another Fordham guy, Joe Moorhead. But yeah, it's a B. All right, we have no expectations. Kent State's in turmoil. I want Kent State to be good at football because I loved watching Sean Lewis and I love watching Kent State kind of mess some people up. When people are just supposed to be chalking them up as a win on their schedule and they're just ruining their days. What are you going to do when Kenny Burns is? Oh gosh, what are we doing? What are we doing, Kenny Burns?